going to do is just briefly, without bigging myself up too much, there's a load of letters at the end of the name. You don't really need to know too much about that. But I'm Omar, also known as Ohms. I run a couple of businesses which you may or may not have heard of. Trinity is a large mortgage brokerage based in Kent with 47 staff members. I jointly own that with Lawrence, who's here in the room, my business partner. It's been going for 10 years. And as well as being a financial advisor, I also do some property stuff. I mainly do the property stuff through two businesses. One is Dennis Developments, is a property development business. And the other, I think we're being told off by someone upstairs for talking too loudly. The other one, if you want to learn about property, just come downstairs. There's a free workshop going on. Ohms Under the Hammer is where I kind of do my Instagram, YouTube, and that sort of stuff. If you're interested to follow me, there'll be a slide at the end. So, before we get started, because I have some letters next to my name, I do need to just give you this brief disclaimer. Today's presentation is to educate you and give you information. Nothing that I say this evening should be taken as financial advice. Don't go and act off the presentation and go and buy a property at auction, certainly one that's not being, sold tomorrow or today. There are lots of auctions happening that we're going to talk about and look at. Get advice from mortgage brokers, solicitors, accountants, tax advice. Anything I say is not advice for your personal circumstances. You need tailored advice. Cool. Okay, so let's jump straight into this and just demystify a little bit about property auctions. We're going to talk about how they really work. So the first thing you need to understand, if you don't know this already, there are two types of property auctions. Most people will be familiar with the first one, which is known as a traditional property auction. This is very well known for when there would be an auctioneer in a room standing behind a table, and he would essentially offer a property for sale, and when the hammer falls, that would legally mean you've exchanged contracts and you've bought the property, and it's offered in a room and it's legally binding once the hammer falls. This is the one that lots of people will have bought properties. Nowadays that's mainly gone online. There are still a couple of London auction houses that are in the room. They're very quiet. I went to one very recently called Barnard Marcus, and there was about 15 people in the room. Typically those auction rooms would have had 200-300 people sandwiched into a very small room. Everyone is now essentially buying property digitally, online, and bidding in their own comfort. The other increasingly well-known type of buying a property at auction is known as the modern method of auction. The largest company at the moment that's doing this in the UK is a company called I Am Sold. You may have heard of them. They partner with various estate agents. Even though it's got the word auction in the title, it's actually not an auction. And what a modern method of auction is where you are still bidding and the highest bidder will win the property, but what you're actually winning is an exclusivity period where you have potentially 56 days to then exchange and complete, and you pay some fees to an estate agent or an auction house up front. You don't legally exchange contracts when the hammer falls like you would with a traditional auction house. The differences between the two: traditional auction houses are typically much shorter time frames. The legal pack is already prepared and you're buying the property subject to the legal pack. Modern method of auction, sometimes there's a legal pack prepared, most of the time sometimes there's still documents, and you go through more of a traditional conveyancing process where the seller could still pull out and you could still pull out, but then there are consequences because of that exclusivity period that you've bought yourself into. So that's the two different types of auctions, and the idea really from today is to understand those two and then work out, if you want to buy property, how they work and the psychology around them, which we'll touch on hopefully in quite a lot of detail. So before we do that, let's whiz on to problem properties. And the reason I mention this is because if you take anything away from today, it would be what not to buy. Okay? If I can leave you with those clear things that you will stick in your head, what the problem properties are at auction, even if you then go and see something via an estate agent and you're not buying it through auction, you may remember these things could cause you difficulty, and hopefully they'll stop you from buying these properties, or you'll at least go into them being more educated, knowing what the problems are, and then being able to resolve those problems. So I've put together some slides that kind of go through potential problems. And I must say, I get phone calls constantly from people that fall into these traps. So this is the area where you really want to make sure you're never going to fall into these traps. I get phone calls with people that have exchanged on things that are unmortgageable with many, many problems. And I've had many people come to me where they've forfeited deposits, sometimes even been sued for something called detrimental loss, where they've lost their deposit and then subsequently the seller is putting the property into the next auction cycle and selling it at a lower price and then suing them for the difference for their losses. So auctions, just to make you really understand this point, they can be a very dangerous place for inexperienced investors, and you need to make sure you know what you're doing. So let's start with this, tenure, lease and title. Now, is there a solicitor in the room? Do we have a solicitor in the room? Conveyancer or solicitor, trained solicitor, anyone? Got one at the back there. So for those who are trained solicitors, fantastic, you'll know all this already. But for anyone who's not, you may miss things because you're not a solicitor. So typically you should have a legal pack looked at by a solicitor. A lot of people don't want to do that. Do you know how many people buy properties at auction and don't even open the documents in the legal pack? Does anyone want to have a guess? The percentage of people that buy properties at auction and don't read all the documents in the legal pack? Anyone know?
50%. Everyone. 90.
It's not 90. Oh, well, yeah, that would be... It's about 42% of people don't open every document in the legal pack. That's basically like just saying, I've seen this property, it's in Liverpool, I'm not going to view it, I'm just going to buy it, and I just don't really know anything about it. It's just you're going in blind. It's absolutely bonkers for people that do that. You should be the people that open the legal pack and download every document and send it to your solicitor and read it 5 times over and upload it to ChatGPT and get it to translate it for you so you can really understand what you're getting yourselves into. That would make a good buyer. So if you don't download legal documents, then you're already in for a real trouble. So the things to look out for, I've put a lovely picture of a London street. I don't know where that is, but I can imagine that being somewhere in Pimlico or Chelsea. And one of the things that people get sucked into at auctions is they see these lovely periodic buildings and they have desire to want to rent them or own them and live in them. But they don't really understand the consequences of buying a very short lease flat. And some of them have very short leases. If they're between 70 and 80, it's kind of a problem, but it can be resolved. When they become under 60 and certainly under 50, even the lease extension calculators online, they won't even give you a figure for what that lease extension would cost. To add to that, we've got all the complexity around the changing legislation, which adds more uncertainty about are these lease extensions going to be cheaper from marriage value or not. So some people overpay massively for leasehold flats. They then have a huge lease extension bill and they end up not getting a deal at all. And the whole idea, if you buy something at an auction, is you should be buying it for something cheaper than you get it for on the open market. So just be careful of those. Ground rent doubling. This can make a property unmortgageable if the ground rent is doubling too frequently. Sometimes these ground rents double every 10 years or they increase rapidly, and so that can become a big problem. Absent freeholders, flying freehold, possessory title, non-absolute title. These are all legal terminology, but they're things that you need to look out for. If you don't know about them, they could cause you problems. Boundary disputes, someone else saying, no, that's my land, it's not your land. You need to know if that is what you're buying. So first of all, you want to assess the tenure, the lease and the title. And if all of that checks out and it's good, you move on to the next step and you may review the property in more detail. Let's just flip to the next. So then there's the non-standard construction, another massive trap that people fall into, unfortunately, quite often. And sometimes, just because it's not ignorance, it's just that they don't realise. First-time buyers see a property, looks too good to be true, ask mum and dad, they don't really know, and they end up buying it. And when you look at this property here, some people would know instantly that is a non-standard concrete construction property that may have some problems. Would they then go and investigate if the concrete was wimpy, no fines, Lang Easy Form or another defective concrete? Maybe not. So it's knowing what you're buying and ascertaining, is that property mortgageable? Because if you're a first-time buyer and you want to get a 95% mortgage on a property that's non-mortgageable, you know, you're going to get stung, and you're going to be in really bad situation when you try to eventually get a mortgage on it. So look out for the problem properties. The other one is large single skin construction. Sometimes properties had a 9-inch brick wall, or they had block cavity brick and they've got a bit of insulation or not inside. But sometimes they had rear additions that were built in single skin brickwork. And if it's quite a large extent of the property that's single skin, you'll find a lot of the time that's also unmortgageable and can be difficult to finance. Condition, so it's quite obvious. If the property doesn't have a kitchen, if it doesn't have a bathroom, no running water, electricity, if there's no roof, if there's no windows, you know, if you can't move into the property, you're not going to get a mortgage on it. Fire damaged properties, these are, again, not mortgageable. And it's not to say don't buy them. Sometimes there's some really good opportunities here. But if you think you're getting a mortgage on this, or you think that this is going to be something that you can just buy with a standard residential or buy-to-let mortgage, that's not going to happen. So you need to have cash or bridging to be able to move quickly and resolve the problems. Structural problems, so subsidence, landslip, heave, trees, collapsed drains, all sorts of problems, monitoring tags around big, large cracks in properties. These are huge problems. Past insurance claims. Sometimes the property's had historic progressive movement and it's no longer moving. It's had an insurance claim. There's no insurer that will now insure it. You have to look out for this. That's why you need to read the legal pack. Because if you don't, you won't know what you're essentially buying. Let's move on. Japanese knotweed. Anyone bought a property with Japanese knotweed? Put your hands in the air if you have. No one. Just one. So me and you are friends because we've both bought Japanese knotweed properties. I actually love Japanese knotweed. That sounds such a strange thing to say, doesn't it? The evasive plant that was brought to the UK as something that they thought was going to be nice to look at turns out to ruin every single property that it gets close to. Now, this looks like a big problem, and if you don't know about it, it certainly is. Japanese knotweed that's close to your property or on your boundary can make it very difficult, if not impossible, to get a mortgage because the plant is so evasive that it can go through concrete, it can go through your foundations, it can cause huge destruction to your property. And who here has ever seen Japanese knotweed? Has anyone seen knotweed? Yeah, it's got a very distinctive look to it. It's kind of like a diamond shape leaf. And sometimes you have red stems, sometimes green. It depends on the time of the year. And if you ever cut one, it has an orange rhizome in the middle of it because these evasive plants, they don't grow on photosynthesis. They can grow without water or sunlight, and that's what makes them so dangerous. So you'll see right at the end, I actually bought a site with Japanese knotweed and we managed to tackle it and get rid of it, and it turned into a very profitable venture. But just knowing about this and looking out for it's important. Sometimes, unfortunately, people cut this stuff down and chuck a load of soil over the top of it, and then you don't know it's there, and you've bought something that then has this proper problem. So do just look out for this in the garden, and certainly if it's growing through the house, you know you have a big problem. Use, occupancy and income profile. So these are other things some people get sucked into. If you don't know what they are, then you're not going to know to avoid them. But, you know, I've put some pictures up. We've got a classic southeast London chicken shop. See them everywhere. And some people don't realise that buying a flat above a chicken shop is a problem for a mortgage provider because they have lots of fires, and essentially that can cause some problems. So flats above commercial in general are an issue, but in particular, just go back one slide with it. So in particular, chicken shops, dry cleaners, petrol stations, hairdressers, anything flammable, anything smelly, the mortgage lenders don't like to lend above them. You can get some funding, but it's expensive and it's typically commercial funding. Late night venues, alcohol licenses, a house that's in the middle of a massive heavy industrial area will also be a problem. So we need to look out for these types of properties, and we also need to look out for the types of tenancies which cause us problems. So sometimes you'll see regulated tenancy, protected tenancy, and the properties will be looking really cheap, and you'll think, wow, this is 50% cheaper than what it should be, but you can't get a mortgage on a regulated tenancy or a protected tenancy where someone can live there for the rest of their life at a reduced rent. They're non-mortgageable because the lender doesn't have step-in rights to ever be able to take that property back. So looking out for this. And then just briefly, HMOs. Does anyone in the room do HMOs? It's a growing strategy that lots of people are focusing on. So if you are, you'll know when you buy properties that are either in or not in Article 4 areas that potentially are C4 or sui generis, the compliance on these HMOs is a list as long as your arm. And sometimes people don't get the compliance right, and then they put these properties into an auction to shift them on because they can't resolve the problems. They could have enforcement notices, they could have no license, they could have building regs that wasn't done because they did the building regs to a C4 6-bed HMO spec instead of a large sui generis HMO spec. So just look out for, ask whenever you see a property at auction, just always ask yourself, first of all, why is that property being sold at auction? And if that's your first question, the second thing you should do is type the address into Google. Just get the address, pop it into Google and push search and then see what comes up once you've put the address in, because you'll be surprised what comes up just from putting it into Google may stop you from going further. Let's whiz on again. And then we're going to move on from this shortly, but again, these are all negative things. I'm like, don't buy at auction. I will tell you some opportunities shortly, so I hope it's all not neggy vibes tonight, but just keep watching and you'll see. So now is really the real red flags, and these are things I look at every time we look to buy a property at auction, is the special conditions. And you'll be pleased to know I've printed a set of special conditions that I'm going to distribute in the second half of this auction masterclass, and we will look through them and you will work together collectively to see what the red flags are in these special conditions. So, but the things that you want to look out for are large premiums, non-refundable deposits, statutory notice periods from standard conveyancing contracts being removed, so no 10 working day notice periods and immediate completions or forfeiture, title packs, missing documents, restrictive covenants, large overage clauses, or another big flag, you've exchanged and the seller won't provide any access and you can't get a survey done, and that can be another problem. Excellent. Right, let's go on. So just the next thing now is really to understand the difference between someone buying a property at auction and someone selling the property at auction. So what we need to do is really understand who wants to buy. Now the answer to this is, if the property is cheap enough, anyone in this room might want to buy a property at auction. It could be a first-time buyer, it could be an institutional company, it could be a property investor. Everybody would buy a property at auction if it was cheap enough. That's the truth of that, okay? So we're not just saying people that buy at auction are sophisticated, because they're not. We get first-time buyers all the time trying to secure cheap properties at auction. So just understanding that is pretty important. Now, the psychology of how auctions work, key to understand this point. Auctions are made to specifically sell property for the maximum amount of money as possible. That's how they've been invented. Everything about the auction cycle is to get the most money as possible. And you guys might think, oh, it's an auction, so that means I should get it for a lower price. But you've got to understand that everything about the auction cycle is essentially working opposite to that. So just think about how a property goes into an auction. A seller will offer a property in auction, they'll prepare a legal pack, there'll be short time for you to view the property, 2 to 3 weeks, lots of people viewing it very quickly in a short period of time, and the property will be offered at a much cheaper price than they're potentially willing to offer the property for sale genuinely. And so what that does is it creates a huge amount of emotion and hype for people thinking they're going to buy this property for real cheap price. So let's give an example. Catford, southeast London, the houses are, let's just say, 450, 500k. A 3-bed house in Catford is being offered at £250,000 and it is in need of modernisation. How many people in the room would like to buy that house for £250,000? If you don't, please leave now, because you're not a property investor and you're not going to make any money. If you want to, you can give it a go, but you're never going to buy it for £250,000. So you might as well leave now as well. Right, now what you need to understand is that it's purely being offered at £250,000 because what they want to do is get 300 people to view the property and then work out who's going to pay the most money for it. That's how the auction cycle works. Short marketing period, very low guide price, creating the illusion that you might get a deal, and in reality, what they want is lots of people to go and view it, get emotionally attached to it, send their legal pack to their solicitor, arrange a survey, spend some money, go back again, take your parents, get really emotionally involved, as well as the other 300 people that have also done this. And then you then end up on bidding day, and you've written down a figure of, I'm going to buy this house for no more than 350,000 because you've calculated your stamp duty and your refurb costs, and to you it makes sense at 350. You're at home, you've paid a 5k a refundable deposit just to be able to bid, you've done your money laundering checks, you've done this, that and the other, and you're all emotionally ready to buy this property. In fact, you've actually set up an Excel file about kitchens and bathrooms, and you're committed, right? Not all the people in the room will do this, but I'm telling you, so many people do this, okay? And then when the day comes and the auction starts and the auctioneer bids off the wall to get the selling price up to where they would potentially have a reserve, whether that reserve is official or artificial or not, and they eventually reach, at quite quick velocity, the 350,000 that you would be willing to pay for the property, what do? Do you carry on? Do you go to 351, 352, 353, 54? And before you know it, you've paid 450k for a house that you've written down 350k for. Do you know how many times I see that exact scenario happen? And it's because people get so emotionally attached that they rationalise in their head, this house is still worth 450 because the one up the road is worth 500. What they don't realise is there's 3% plus VAT on top of the purchase price as buyer's fees. There's the stamp duty. You need to refurb the house. And before you know it, the sellers actually achieve more money than they would have got if they put the property on the market through the open estate agency route. So if you understand that from the beginning, that is how auctions work. Okay, it's solely trying to make you spend more money. Even about bidding, right? If you ever watch an auction again, there's lots of auctions happening today and tomorrow. Clive Empson's right now. Savills has been today, and there's a number of London auction houses that have happened these 2 days. But if you ever get a chance to log on and watch an auctioneer on a rostrum, they will always start the bidding very aggressively. So it'll be 250, 255, 260. Their whole routine is to make you bid quickly and not have any time to think and rationale what you want to do. It's done on purpose. Yeah, it's not just, oh, let's finish this really quickly. It's about trying to make you forget what you've written down as 350 and just get on and create a hype that lots of people want this property so that you pay more than you should have. So that's how auctions work. There's lots of other dark secrets about auction, so we can touch on some of them. But let's get on a little bit. So who sells property at auction? If you can understand who the seller is, you can understand their mindset, I believe that will make you a better buyer, because if you know who you're buying from, you can then start to tailor how you want to buy the property. If you don't know who's selling it, you can't do that. So these are the types of sellers at property auctions, corporate sellers. So these are actually genuinely good ways of buying property, and you typically don't find any sort of fraudulent activity or anything that you could. Sometimes there are still issues with these properties, but you know these types of corporate and institutional sellers, they're typically just selling property at auction because they want transparency of sale and they need to give everyone the ability to buy this property and for it to sell for the most amount of money. It's typically no other reason than that. So housing associations, they need to dispose of old stock quickly. Property companies and developers, sometimes they have problems, they change strategy. Councils, police, banks, repossessions, LPA receiverships, mortgagee in possession, those types of things are pretty standard in auction. And sometimes pension funds and institutional investors, they also dispose of assets. So if you see those, do your due diligence, but I wouldn't say huge red flags, but anything at auction can cause you a problem, so just be careful. Let's have a look at these ones. So the 3 Ds that you always get told about in property education, the death, debt and divorce, the ones that you should look out for. So this is, again, people being repossessed, close to repossession and having their property taken off them by an administrator or a liquidator. These typically are rapid transactions you need to complete very quickly. Sometimes they have lots of stuff missing in the legal pack, but generally it's probably because someone's not paid their mortgage or there's an issue, and sometimes they can be good properties to buy. Carry on if we can. Private sellers. You need to be a bit cautious on this, but it's not the area you really need to be cautious. So anyone in this room, probate sales, someone inheriting a house and fallen out with all your siblings, and you've had 3 failed attempts trying to sell it via an estate agent, you now put it into an auction to guarantee the sale. Individuals that just really need to get out for whatever reason, moving abroad, sometimes people choose auction as the route of a guaranteed exit. So this is the area that you need to be very, very cautious of. I'm going to tell a couple of stories before we go to our break. So what an auction trader is someone who specifically buys property with the view at selling it at auction for a profit. And some auction traders are very clever and they have good morals. And then there are others that are probably very clever, but their morals are not in the same light as the first one, and so you need to approach with caution. Some auction traders sell huge volumes. There's 3 or 4 very large auction traders in London that sell in excess of 50 properties per month that they're trading at auction, and so you just need to know what you're looking at and who the seller is. So good traders, let's just briefly touch on a good trader. There's a particular strategy, I could talk about this for about a day, but it's called auction arbitrage. It's quite a niche auction strategy. It's where you take a property from one auction, you buy it, you exchange contracts, you then sell it at another auction within a very short period of time, and you sell it for more money in a different auction house. So let's just think about a commercial property in a commercial property in London, but it's being sold by a Manchester auction house, and it's not got the same London investor pool looking at that property. Even though it's in London, it's been offered in a Manchester auction house. You buy it for X amount, you then put it back into a Savills London auction house, and you get the London attraction, and you make a bit of money selling it very quickly. That's known as auction arbitrage. Here's an example of auction arbitrage, and this was done by a very clever auction trader. I tell you now, it's not me, and they made quite a lot of money very quickly buying a property. So they bought this whole thing here in December 2023. It was 2 shops, this shop and the 3 mobile phone shop. You can see the extent. They bought it at auction. They paid £850,000 for the 2 shops together. And the property was producing income of 97 plus 31. Both were tenanted, both had leases. And a bit strange for someone to sell 2 shops. You sort of think, why wouldn't you sell them separately? Naturally there's more people that would want to buy 1 shop rather than 2 together. And it's a large amount of money to depart with, 850,000 as well. So this auction trader bought them both, exchanged contracts, and then they split them into 2 separate lots. And they sold one at Savills at 811,000, and then they put the next property and sold for 286,000. So they made lots of money very quickly, just splitting something which had more eyes on it, because there were many more people that wanted to buy a small shop like this for 286,000, especially those SIP and SAS investors and the people that are into commercial property. It sold and done in a very short space of time. Bought it in December, both were sold and went into January, February auction houses. So quick maths, nothing untoward, sophisticated investor that saw an opportunity and moved it on very quickly and made some money. Would anyone like to do that in the room? Yeah, you would. If you said no, I was going to just ask you to leave again, because it's like, what are you doing here? But so it's a great profit, but unfortunately there is a dark side to auctions as well, and that's the bit that I really want you to take away from today, where you say, look, let's just know about this, let's be careful, and if you ever go to buy or sell a property at auction, and you'll have some understanding. There's another strategy that people do, and it's kind of implemented in that first auction arbitrage that I spoke to you about, known as title splitting. It's like this mystical thing that property gurus say, oh, you need to learn about title splitting, like it's some really tricky thing to understand. It's so simple, really. You just need a good solicitor, someone who can draw land registry compliant drawings, and you can split things. And so that strategy is known as title splitting. The classic example is you buy a block of flats and you split it up and you sell off the flats. It's done very often, and it also applies to commercial property. Now, Title splitting is when a freeholder wishes to divide their property and reallocates the ownership accordingly. That's the definition. And the philosopher Aristotle said, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So that was his philosophy. Now, I've done some title splitting and made a bit of money out of doing this. And my philosophy, Mehmet, property investor from Kent, mine is the sum of the parts is often actually worth more than the sum of the whole. Now, if you're around at lunch or at the end and you want to ask me some questions about some of those types of title splitting deals I've done, I can show you, or we can catch up after. But that's a strategy that you could look into if you want to investigate it more. So this is the bit before we go to a break. We've got 5 minutes to just whiz through this and then we'll go to a break. This is the ugly truth, okay? Now, I need to be very careful not to mention names, mention addresses, because it's a dark underworld. And what I don't want to do is get drawn into some litigious matter where an auction trader gets annoyed by me giving away a load of secrets. But I'm here to educate you and tell you what to look out for. The ugly truth of auction trading is sometimes people do things to make money and they don't really care about the outcome for the person buying the property. So here's a little story. I got offered this property here a number of years ago now. I won't tell you the location. It was sent to me via an estate agent, said we've got this problem property. It's got a huge crack on the back of the property. That's actually my hand. Don't know if it looks like it. Kind of looks like it a bit. And I went there to the back of the property. The estate agent let me in. I saw the crack, put my hand in it, and sent a photo to my dad, who's a builder for the last 25 years, and said, "Dad, look at this crack. What do you think?" Yeah, because I didn't know too much about how to resolve these problems. And after I'd looked at it, the sort of side and back of the house was really collapsing. The property was on a corner of a load of terraced houses. The whole sort of terrace looked like it had all moved, and it was in really bad disrepair. The area was really known for heavy subsidence. So I said to the estate agent, it's not one for me. I'm a bit out of my comfort zone. I don't really want to take on this huge underpinning project. And I just moved on. It was offered to me. Unfortunately, that property, the next person who viewed it was an auction trader. And what they did was exchanged on the property, locked the back door and put it into an auction. Okay, and someone bought that house and they didn't know about the crack because they never got to go into the garden and look at the back of the house. And that's a true story. It actually happened because I went back to look at it when it was going to auction because it was offered at less money than it was offered to me initially. And I thought, how is this now going to auction for cheaper? Let me go and have a look at it. Back door was locked. And so it's just a strategy that someone was using to fool someone else into buying something without really realising what they were getting themselves into. So, heard a caveat emptor? Yeah, buyer beware. Don't take anything for granted in auctions. People cover Japanese knotweed. They render over cracks. They paint things. They do anything to make money. Yeah, not everyone in this room would do that, but some people do. And unfortunately, people buy these properties and then they get found out after. And there are huge problems that they have to dig a big hole to sort the issue out. So, how to spot unscrupulous auction traders. There's a number of things you can look at. Just go back one actually, we'll stop there for our break. First thing you can look for is the auction lot number and the auction house. Some auction houses in London are overrun with property traders of that kind, the unscrupulous kind. If the lot number is very low, let's say it's between 1 and 50 and it's a very large catalogue, I'm not saying every lot between 1 and 50 is an auction trader that does this, but there's more chance between 1 and 50 that that is an auction trader. And that's because people that sell volume properties at auctions are given preferential lot numbers to allow them to sell their properties first for more money. It's the closer you are to the front of the catalogue, the more chance you'll have more eyes on your lot. The second thing is very large fees hidden in the legal pack, in the special conditions particularly, sometimes written out in words. So instead of it saying 2.99% plus VAT added, the buyer will pay, it will be written out in actual words, and so your eye will skim the special conditions and you'll miss that and you won't realise that you have to pay a substantial amount of money more. Also, the other sort of areas to look at is if you look at the title documents, not the title plan, the title register, to see who the owner is. Sometimes you'll see the owner's details have been redacted, so there'll be a black line, and that's showing that they don't want you to know who the owner is because they've exchanged, they've got control, but they haven't completed. So those are a couple of areas. We'll dive into this auction trader topic in a little bit more detail very shortly, and we'll start to look at some case studies. But let's leave it there for a quick 5-minute break, 10-minute break. This is our lunch break, is it? Dinner break. Okay.
Which country you are?
Yeah. So I would recommend if you stay right to the end, because there'll be some things I'll give away at the end, including a max bid calculator and a due diligence checklist for when you're now looking at auctions, and they're free if you stay to the end. You just need to put your email address in and we send it out to you. And the next part is the sort of classroom activity where we're actually going to look at things together in the room rather than me just talking at you the whole time. So stay to the end and hopefully you'll get some value.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Omar.